Hello everybody, today I am at the Henry Cowell State Park campgrounds here with Portia, who is the environmental scientist of the Natural Resources Program. Hi!
Hello!
I am so excited for this interview. I am really excited to learn a lot more about what you do, what the Natural Resources Program do. So first, what do you as an environmental scientist do?
Right. My job is to take care of the plants and the animals and all of the natural resources in the park. And I like to think of parks as a lot of different groups of people working together to take care of the park. Let's say the buildings and the infrastructure, this campground that we're in. Somebody needs to maintain it, and that's our maintenance function. And then we have the visitor services folks. Those are our park rangers, the people who take care of visitors. And then we have the interpreters who help educate and teach the people of California about the different plants and animals and things that you might see in a state park, or say history or what have you. And then we need someone to take care of the park itself, and that's what we do.
That is great. So taking care of the park, how do you do that? What do you do?
Let's just say everything is based off of plants. The foundation of our environment, everything that you're seeing around you, right?
Yes.
And so most of the work that we do, probably 40 to 50%, is focused on vegetation and vegetation management.
Oh.
Right? So those can be a lot of different forms. First of all, we have invasive plant species.
Right.
And so oftentimes just by removing the invasive plants, everything takes care of itself. And then secondly, you have the overgrowth of plants. Believe it or not, that's a big part of what we do, is to manage the growth of plants. And because of fire suppression, we don't have this constant sort of burning down of things. Everything's allowed to build up, and because of where we are in our climate, the decomposition doesn't keep up with plant growth. So you get more plant growth than really we can handle.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that leads to intense wildfires. And one of the things that we do right now is we manage the forest to try and reset that balance, to try and take care of some of the vegetation so that we have the ability to do things like prescribed burns to reintroduce fire back into the ecosystem after more than 150 years of fire suppression.
Wow. The human world is greatly altering the natural world. Global warming, stuff like that. So, but the natural world, Earth Mother, is really quite the performer of miraculous antics. So do you think the natural world can adapt to the pace of human change?
That's really hard. That's sort of the question of our lifetimes, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
How are we going to respond to climate change, everything that is facing us? There's a lot of unknowns. And I say that, I think that there will be the potential for, say, plant communities moving around in response to a changing climate. But in general, these things work on a slower scale than what's currently happening. So I don't know, I'm just as in the dark as most of the rest of us.
Yeah, and so your occupation, you are more exposed to the changing world, right? So do you think it offers hope, or does it invoke feelings of frustration and sadness?
What I can do is look specifically at what's happening where I work, here. And I feel a lot of hope, because when I started here 25 years ago, I was just out of college and I didn't even know there was a natural resources program, right? So I began actually my career here in this park, working in that kiosk that you drove by.
Wow!
And I found out that there was a natural resources function. And when I started working for them, I was one of a team of 5 or so people that went out and did sort of the boots on the ground work in the park, pulling those invasive plants, doing those prescribed burns. And again, that's just a crew of 5 people. There were a few environmental scientists that were supervising us. And so fast forward 25 years to now, and I think that there's 11 of us environmental scientists.
Wow!
And we have a crew of more than 30 people.
Whoa.
And so I think that there's this increased recognition and understanding that managing this environment around us is really important. That shows itself through funding So how do you pay for what you want to do?
Right.
It's like there's limited resources, finite. And so one of the things that we've done is we've gone out and we've gotten money. We have applied for grants to support those positions. And we have also received state funding, largely in the form of wildfire and forestry resiliency money. I know we're going to get to that, but that's been an amazing amount of funding that has allowed us to do a lot more good work.
That is great, how everybody works as a community to help the natural world. So, you know, the sense of community, how biodiversity in food chains and food webs or whatever works together to, you know, sustain itself, and how we humans work together as a community to help each other, like the natural world. It's kind of like symbiosis. What lessons do you think can we take away from the natural world? Like there's of course symbiosis, but of course there's commensalism and parasitism too that we usually don't think about, but you know, it's still there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think our relationship with nature has often been an extractive one. What can we get from it? What can we take? How can we make money off of it?
Right.
What can it do for us? And I think if you look around, you see there's this concept of ecosystem services that, like, we're constantly trying to get something.
Yes,
and so we are just by default, just by living and breathing, we are benefiting from all of the things that nature provides, right?
Yes.
So the oxygen cycle, the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the carbon cycle, all of these things support us, and they're done primarily through the nature that you see around us.
Yes.
And so I look to that in terms of that's a life-sustaining process that we just don't really spend any time thinking about.
Exactly.
And I find hope and I find wonder there. And I think this idea of connectedness is extremely important for people to feel and to recognize. And so getting people out into nature to see everything that it has to offer. And our brains, something happens, something changes in our minds when we are looking at things that are green. It benefits us in ways that we just don't have a way to quantify. So I'm not sure if that gets at your question.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I would like to edit the phrase, an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Okay.
A walk a day keeps the doctor away.
Absolutely.
Especially in like parks and like, you know, green. Green is good for the eyes, the scientific research says. So I like how the Natural Resource Program and the environmental scientists are exposed and they deal with the foundation of what keeps us alive. Plants, obviously releasing oxygen, you know, all that good stuff that sustains us.
Yes.
So you also look at invasive plants. Humans think that sometimes they introduce invasive plants subconsciously by accident, and most times they think that the positives, like what humans have to gain from that, overrides the harms. For example, the kudzu plant, the plant that ate the South, basically.
The invasive plant epidemic is one that will continue. There's just no stopping it. And it doesn't just apply to invasive plants, but things that we're dealing with now are invasive pathogens, say Phytophthora remora, which is something that attacks our local tan oak trees and kills them. We have something called an invasive shothole borer. 20 years ago, no sudden oak death, and now there is sudden oak death everywhere, right? The shothole borer just was found earlier this year in this park, and it is preferentially killing box elder trees. We have so many invasive plants that we're working on in addition to those things. Some of our primary plants would say be eucalyptus trees, English ivy, Cape ivy, and those species, amongst many others, they are already well established. They are here and they're here to stay. And one of the things we're trying to do is to work on removing them where we can, where it makes sense, where we have money. I think you were getting at what are potential benefits of invasive plants?
Yeah, like the ecosystem is very flexible. Like it can adapt. So for example, the eucalyptus trees, the English ivy, can it kind of meld itself into the ecosystem, or can other parts of the ecosystem adapt to accommodate this invasive species?
We have a handful of examples where we can say that an invasive species is good for one particular thing. Or eucalyptus can help birds some of the time. They can also do damage, right? So some examples of those might be the tamarisk tree is something that supports the nests of southwestern willow flycatchers. So it's an endangered bird that lives in Southern California. Great. However, tamarisk takes over miles and miles of riparian areas in the desert and makes it really unpleasant, well, inhospitable to the native species, right?
Yes.
It outcompetes them. So yes, it benefits one, but does that outweigh the damage that it's doing overall? You know, I am a believer, like I believe that removing invasive plants increases overall biodiversity, and I think that that outweighs, for the most part, all of these bad things.
Right. So after doing the cost-benefit analysis for the invasive plants, what pros and what cons they offer to the ecosystem that they took over, do you have different methods of removing or possibly leaving the invasive species out of?
I think we try and focus on the ones that we can make a difference on, and then the ones that are doing the most, what we could say is the most damage. We have a European dune grass that takes over the dunes. It stabilizes them. It's actually planted to stop the sand from moving around. That is not a good thing. The natural process in dunes is they move. That sand is transported by the wind, and we want to encourage those natural processes.
Right.
So we've been removing invasive dune grass. Now, how do we start doing that? First of all, we started where there was like a native plant population that we could work around. We began there and we worked out from there. There's basically 3 different ways. There's mechanical ways that you can kill things. So that's the physical act of digging them out and removing them.
Right.
And then there's chemical. So that is through the use of, just exactly what you might think. So herbicide or say an insecticide that might kill things. The third method is a pretty cool novel method that takes a lot of energy and work to make happen.
Right.
It's called biocontrol. Those are things that we're looking to work on species that are notoriously challenging to kill and remove. For example, there's a plant called Cape ivy that grows again in riparian areas, and it just grows up over everything, a lot like kudzu, and it just completely smothers it and blocks all light and chokes out the native plant species, and will literally cover miles and miles of creek. When you try and pull it out physically, it breaks off into little teeny tiny pieces, and those, each of those little pieces, if you don't get them, you know, they will reroot again.
They will reroot?
They will reroot.
Wow.
They will come right back. And so you could try and pull them out, you could try and spray that, but you end up killing a lot of other things in the process. And so biocontrol is the process of finding an insect that is native to the place that the invasive plant comes from and doing a lot of tests on it. This is done by the United States Department of Agriculture, and they're looking to find an insect that will eat nothing else but the Cape ivy or die. And so they work to find those insects and then breed them and then release them. And so that has happened for a handful of different species that are notoriously bad for the environment. And so again, that's a limited tool, but it is still a tool in our toolbox that we can use to work on invasive plants.
Right, that is great. It's kind of like you're finding a predator where basically it just relies, its whole diet is the invasive species.
Exactly. One of the problems with invasive plants is that they're taken out of their own place, right? In their own place, they are integrated into the environment. They have a whole host of insect species and animal species that would eat them and predate them and limit their potential spread and growth. And you take them away from wherever they came from and you put them in a brand new place. And if it's suitable for them, most of our invasive species, they will just take over. Right? And they will fill in all of the space that is suitable to them. That is a problem, is sort of foundational to the work that we do.
Biocontrol. You find a predator that can eat that invasive species as prey. But what if the only predator is one that lives in its previous environment? So if you introduce it, it becomes another invasive species.
I want to be clear that that's exactly what I'm talking about. But the test that the government does is to ensure that insect evolved with that plant.
So it only
eats that. And so it does take a lot of work because many insects are not specialists, they are generalists. They will eat a lot of different plants. But you're right, this insect will come in and will only eat that.
So you're technically melding two ecosystems. But that insect doesn't have a predator in the present ecosystem.
No, but it would rather die than eat anything else.
So because it only eats that invasive species. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like hitting two birds with one rock.
Exactly. It is a tool to help remove it, and oftentimes it won't remove it 100%. It will just provide that natural check that allows the other plants to also coexist with it. It doesn't remove it entirely, right? Can't do all of it.
But that's the farthest we can go. You can't really demolish a plant. Introducing invasive plants, what about the environment that they were taken away from? Usually we just focus on the environment that they were introduced in.
That isn't necessarily a thing, right? The environment that they're taken from, they're integrated into that ecosystem, and they don't have negative effects on it. Generally, say it's seed that's brought in or something. So it's not really doing damage to the place it came from.
So technically you're not uprooting it from its environment, you're just bringing it over.
There are many examples of intentional introductions. Eucalyptus trees, a lot of settlers brought English ivy or periwinkle vinca.
Oh, periwinkle.
They were brought here. The long-term impacts of what they would do were just not really considered. That continues to happen. We still have places you can go and buy French broom, which is one of our most invasive species.
Really?
Yeah, you can go to the local hardware store and pick up a bunch of different invasive species. And of course, that's not taking into account the fact that there are new ones that we just don't necessarily know about. A good example of this is something called stinkwort. Stinkwort. I first saw it about 10 years ago growing on the side of the freeway over in San Jose, coming up out of the cracks in the concrete, right? And then it started popping up in different disturbed areas here. Its seeds are wind dispersed, and they float away like a dandelion, right? And so they end up anywhere, like in a pile of mud that a truck drives through and then drives into a park, and they can easily spread once they become established. So there's all of the old invasions that we're dealing with, and then there's all of the new ones, the ones that are still arriving.
Right. Wow, that is overwhelming.
It is, but one of the cool things, we have a program called Early Detection Rapid Response.
Cool.
And the idea is to try and work on an invasive species when it's still fresh and new, before it has become well established. Because if you can pick it up then, it's so much less work.
Right.
What is an animal that you'd like to go see when you're out in a park somewhere?
Okay, I like banana slugs. They're very adorable.
Okay.
I wouldn't say bear, because that might chomp you if you get too close.
Right, but mountain lion, same.
Exactly.
Because they're predators. They're at the very top of the food web. They're at the very top of that food pyramid. If you think about all of the things that are needed to support one of those rare animals, you're familiar with this pyramid concept, right?
The energy pyramid?
The energy pyramid, right? And so what's at the bottom of that energy pyramid?
The producers.
The producers, so those are the plants, right? And they're everywhere. They support all of the things that are above them.
Yes.
And so what's above plants?
And then you have the first level consumers.
Yes, so those are the herbivores, things that as you go up, you lose 90% of the energy every time you go up a layer in that pyramid.
Right.
So when you get to the top of the pyramid, you are limited to just a few things because the energy has to go, you're reducing by 90% each.
Exactly.
So the foundation, those plants, they are supporting everything right at the top.
Yes.
Right? And so if you fill part of those plants with non-native plants, think of those as empty calories in the environment. So this is like the junk food. And if you do that, it's not supporting all of the other insects and animals that support all of those top level, say, predators, things that people are really generally excited to see. And so those empty calories, they cannot be replaced by anything but other native plants.
Right, I see, because the environment has adapted and the plants and the animals have adapted.
Yeah, and then you end up with fewer of all of the species above it.
Right, so is that why a lot of the species and animals, plants, insects alike are going extinct or endangered? Because either like habitat loss, invasive plants, or like poaching.
Yes, any and all of those things.
I see. All right, so the environment is tough. It's resilient, but sometimes, that density independent factor just swoops in like a wildfire and then decimates everything. So, a recent occurrence that probably was all over the news was the CZU Wildfire Complex that kind of just destroyed San Mateo County and Santa Cruz County, the trees. So, how do ecosystems recover after that, and how does it affect the way humans manage the parks?
think about fire as a natural process.
Right.
When you look at the area that burned very intensely, it feels catastrophic. Right?
Yes, it does.
It feels devastating at the plants and environment. I'm not saying anything about the people's homes and the loss of individual, say, lives or individual animals. But fire on its own is a natural process.
Yes.
And we are missing that natural process. We've had 100+ years of fire suppression. We actively try and put out every fire, even fires that aren't necessarily going to do a lot of damage. I'm trying to focus on the good parts of the CZU Lightning Complex. We've been largely protected here in Santa Cruz Mountains because it's cool and it's wet. We get fog and it's so lovely in the summertime. It's very cool here. As a result of the increasingly bad fires that we've been experiencing, these very intense megafires, we have received funding from the governor. Our program used to have about $5,000 a year to spend on doing prescribed fire activities. We have more than $1 million a year now.
Oh.
The funding that came as a result of the Wildfire and Forestry Resiliency Program has been amazing. We are able to do so many more things than we were able to do before. So just money alone supports this program.
Yeah.
Secondly, the fire has been like a reset. Yes, a lot of buildings burned down. Yes, we have to do a lot in terms of trying to recover and rebuild, but we're doing it. Yeah. And in the meantime, we're able to start off with almost something of a clean slate. Yes, it took a lot of work to just clean up the after effects of the fire, but at this point, a lot of the vegetation is much reduced, and so we're looking at different ways of managing the forests into the future.
Right.
And it wouldn't have been possible without, one, everything burning down, two, sort of that natural reset.
Yes, definitely. I heard that fires release sequoia tree seeds, and it burns like the upper canopy, so like the younger sprouts can receive sunlight.
Yeah, so that's part of what I was talking about in terms of a natural process, right?
Exactly.
So fire, think of it as like cleaning your house. Like it will create an environment that looks markedly different than this. So let's say take the bushes over here, fire will clean that up. It'll make it more park-like. It will consume a lot of material. It'll burn through the duff and the leaf litter, and all of that is really good. And as it does that, it releases nutrients, kills pests, it stimulates regrowth. And then some plants need fire. Their seeds, as you mentioned, have a coating on them that requires smoke or heat in order to release them.
Right, so the Natural Resource Program has, part of the job is fire suppression. So how do you know if that fire is necessary or if that fire is just damaging, harmful?
I want to be very clear about exactly what we do as part of our fire program. So I generally don't do fire suppression. Mostly what we do is the lighting of fires during safe and basically under a prescription. So we have a plan to burn certain areas to achieve certain goals. And so that's what we do. Generally, our role is not to do fire suppression. There's Cal Fire is our local agency that does that. And so say this park, for example, if you walk 5 minutes that way, you will end up in a totally different habitat. It is not under tree canopy, it's largely shrubs, a community that requires intense fire to basically burn it to the ground, and then everything comes back from that. It's incredible to walk through those areas after we burn them and see the different plant species. It's much more open and sunny, say now when we've burned it, and then it won't need to burn again for 100 and something years. This forest around us, we might want to burn this forest if we could do it safely, which is its own challenge. We might want to burn this every, 7 years, something like that. But it's very expensive and challenging to do prescribed burning, and so we have to be really focused and clear about our goals and what we're trying to do. We focus on areas that maybe really need fire in their systems in order to do that seed release, that thing that we talked about, right?
Cool, yeah. So it's kind of like, as you said, nature resetting itself. So it can grow better in the next decade or however long it needs before its next fire. But now, because of climate change, your good old friend, fires are happening more often and sometimes, usually, not giving the ecosystem enough time to recover.
Yeah, it's causing something we call type conversion. So let's take a Southern California community that burns again and again and again in the short span of time through artificial fire starts, through whatever it is. You can have a change in the habitat from native shrubs, and then the next time it burns, the native shrubs are growing back, but they don't need fire again for another 100 years. And so then they get fire, and now what you start to see is invasive grasses, say, start to come in. Or other smaller forb-like plants. And then that burns again before it needs to, and then all of a sudden you have mostly invasive plants, invasive grasses that come in.
Right.
And so that is the reality of what we're looking at. I am concerned for our local forest that is something that could happen.
Yeah, so maybe an invasive plant, because of the circumstances, will overtake technically the whole forest.
Yeah, I don't know what that could look like yet. It could be a native plant that ends up doing well.
Oh yeah, maybe a really resilient one.
Yeah, and I want to mention that, after CZU, the forest floor is basically kind of, say, cleaned up.
Yes.
There's not a lot of anything. It's just dirt, just soil, right? It's just the ground. And in the first several years post-fire, we had an extreme explosion of ceanothus, which is blue blossom or California lilac. And it was absolutely everywhere. And before the fire, it wasn't anywhere.
So is it native?
It's native. It's also a nitrogen fixer. And so I think that this idea that fire is part of the ecosystem, right? That ceanothus responds to the burn. It was everywhere. I would say like across the entirety of Big Basin. Okay?
Wow.
18,000 acres, hardly any ceanothus, like maybe, a few here and there, but it was everywhere post-fire. So what does that tell me? So that tells me a couple of things. One is that landscape had ceanothus sometime long ago. So we have to open up our minds about this time scale that is really challenging for us because we think in terms of our own lifetime, say.
Yes.
And so think 400, 500, 600 years. Who knows how old those seeds were in order to be everywhere. So that landscape had ceanothus, supported it at some point. It tells you that the area was open enough to support it because ceanothus doesn't grow underneath a redwood canopy, right? And so I think, thinking about ceanothus, and now there's all this fuel that has come up as a result of the ceanothus, and I think it's good. It acts as again, a nitrogen fixer, so it helps build fertilizer, growth factor in the soil.
Exactly.
And that's good. We want that. It also acts as a ground cover, so when the rain comes, the soil isn't exposed. Great. All of that is really great. Now, 20 years, fast forward 20 years, what does the forest look like? That ceanothus is now 20 feet tall, and it's starting to die. It only lives about that long. And so now all of a sudden we have a lot of material in the forest, a lot of vegetation, a lot of ceanothus that is starting to senesce, get old, and be more available to burn. Now what happens when you burn, if there's another wildfire? That's my greatest concern at this point. It's like, what happens in the event that we have a wildfire at that point? What do we do? What happens to the forest? Then we might really kill some of those redwood trees, because most of the redwood trees didn't die. They lost most of their above ground canopy, a lot of larger branches and limbs and tops were lost, but the trees themselves are still alive. Yeah, and so I don't know what's gonna happen then, but part of the fire program that we're doing, that we work on, is trying to prevent that potential from happening. And we're gonna do that through prescribed burns. We're gonna do that from individual treatments of different forest areas.
Right. So for the ceanothus, it definitely was there because the fire kind of introduced its boom again. But what caused it to die? Because technically it should reproduce, right? So that means that it would be a stable
Are you
population.
familiar with the concept of the seed bank?
No.
All right, so acorns are made by the oak trees here. Those are big, you can kind of see them, but a lot of the plants around us, you don't see their seeds unless you're looking really closely. What happens when that blackberry bush behind us, what happens when it continues to grow and make seed? Where does the seed go? It just ends up on the soil, more soil gets built. There's just a lot of seed out there. If you just take a soil column and you look at the distribution of seeds within it, there are millions of seeds just everywhere. And so the ceanothus seeds were there. They were there because the ceanothus was there. Right. But it has been so long since it was suitable for the ceanothus, we had no idea.
Oh, but the fire kind of burned away that.
Burned away everything. The sunlight is now shining on the soil. It stimulates them, and now they're able to grow and do exactly what sort of nature designed them to do, which is the things I mentioned.
That's so cool. So the seed was buried.
It was buried. It was all in the soil, and it gave the right conditions, and it grew.
Right, so before that wildfire, it was like kind of just like smothered by soil, and there wasn't sunlight perforating through. But the wildfire kind of burned through the canopy, kind of burned away like the top layer of soil a little bit. And then so it was exposed to all of the right conditions for it to grow.
Exactly.
Wow, that's so cool. So it's like able to sustain itself over years.
Until the redwoods grow back, and then the ceanothus will die back, and then give it another 100 years, and you'll not know maybe that there was ceanothus there. Just to me, the story that it told about the vegetation history was incredible. To me, it was a really eye-opener.
The timeline.
Yeah,
it's a resilient species.
Yeah, it's hard for us to like think in terms of 100, 200, 300 year time frames.
Definitely. Wow.
Yeah.
This is so magical.
Yeah.
Hopefully the natural world can be able to adapt.
Yeah.
I think it can, because it's miraculous. You know, after extinctions and extinctions, it just booms back.
Yes. It's incredible.
Well, thank you so much, Portia.
Thank you for all the questions. It's been great to talk to you.
I learned so much. My brain is booming. Cool. Shall we high five?
Yeah, sure.